Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever live stream of innovative investment ideas. My name is Dave, and so might have a few technical hiccups here while I get set up. So streaming is obviously a different beast to editing videos in the traditional sense. Hopefully this audio is working. Okay, so first of all, I just wanted to say that the channel is still alive, despite the lack of content for the last probably 2 to 3 months. So based on a couple of things, mostly to do with just the equivalent of writer's block. Haven't been able to put pen to paper. Haven't been able to find the energy to actually produce videos, I guess. But hopefully this live stream will kickstart the channel back to life, get a bit of interaction, and also just wanted to say thanks to all the subscribers and all the people who have supported the channel in the process up to this point. Hopefully I can continue to deliver high quality content and just throw out some ideas to help people make some money in this crazy market. So if you're just dropping by, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I've got my eye on a second monitor looking at any questions that pop up. Happy to answer, happy to look at any ticker symbols that people want me to express an opinion about. But up until I get some questions in the chat, I guess I'll just rant on a few ideas that I've been looking at probably during the last month or so, during this downtime. So despite the lack of content, I'm essentially on my phone 24 hours a day, looking at finance news, tracking all sorts of ticker symbols, looking at trends, looking at any ideas that I think could be worthwhile investments. So let's just dive right into it basically. And I think I'll probably go on several tangents, but feel free to stop me and we can answer any questions or just carry on with any ideas that you guys have. So we got our first. So my friend Jan from Germany, from Deutschland, good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. So I'm gonna start discussing a few things now. So obviously, Jan, thanks again for coming by and showing your support. Feel free to I know we discuss things quite often on our DMs, but feel free to interrupt me any time. So I'm just gonna transition the screen now. So I guess the first thing, of many random thoughts is this crazy run up of Bitcoin that we've had, probably over the last, it's been going up steadily ever since the big dip after the 2017 runoff. So if you look at this chart here, so, obviously 2017 peaked at about 20 grand. So, people thought this was kind of the highest point that Bitcoin could ever reach. And, we saw a precipitous drop, back down to earth, I think around to the 3,000 level, where it stayed, probably all throughout late 2018, all the way through to, the sort of mid part of 2019. And then, we started seeing a steadily pick up again all the way to probably late 2020, where it started going parabolic, essentially. And here we are in early 2021 at the price essentially at 50 grand now. So that's just under 49 here. And this is it's a lot of the Bitcoin bulls out there. This is probably not unexpected. This is something that they've always sort of always thought that would be the case. You see people throwing out numbers of being worth 50 grand or 100 grand, 200 grand, and in some outlandish cases, people have said this is going to be worth $1 million. million US dollars, you know, at some point in the future. And yeah, it's kind of hard to argue when you see this kind of chart. You know, it's kind of there's always too many arguments about, you know, fundamentally it's not worth, you know, it's not even worth, you know, $1 or whatever it is. You know, but here we're at 50 grand. But I do have some money invested directly into Bitcoin, but I guess what I want to say is that there is a lot of other sort of consequences of this for the stock market. And if you're an investor in stocks, why is this relevant to you? You know, so obviously we can start looking at that sort of thought or that train of thought as something. So so if you look at other companies, like obviously Tesla just announced that they had bought 1.5 billion US dollars worth of Bitcoin and are holding it on their balance sheet essentially just as cash. You know, so it's essentially, it's not even an asset per se. They're just using it as a replacement for cash as a holding. But obviously, because it's so volatile and the performance of it lately, it is kind of like an investment in itself too. And other companies are doing the same. So if we look at one of the, I think this was actually predating Tesla, there was a stock called MicroStrategy, right? So if we look at their ticker symbol, so actually, you know what? I'm gonna look at it on TradingView because we get a bit of a better breakdown than the Google chart there. So let's look at MicroStrategy just for a second here. So pull up the chart here. Yep. Okay, so you can see that this chart is pretty reminiscent of the Bitcoin chart that we just looked at. So the CEO of this company, like I said, predated the Tesla announcement, where they literally said that they had converted some of their cash on the balance sheet to Bitcoin holdings as well. And as you can see, obviously, investors in the company have sort of taken that as a proxy to the rise of Bitcoin, kind of like a leverage play almost, because Bitcoin went from what was it, like $3,000 to $20,000 to $50,000. And you can see that, okay, let's try to work out. Okay, this stock has only doubled. So actually it's less or tripled from about this point, 2021. So I'm just going to jump around for a second here. Bitcoin price. So I wanted to see when it first peaked. Go back to TradingView. BTC. So yeah, like I said, so the run up started in late December, where it hit 40,000, then it sort of faded a little bit down to the low 30s, then it started to run up recently in the last month or so. If we go back to MicroStrategy, so we look at late 20s, so there was a little bit of a pick up here to correspond with that initial Bitcoin run, and it didn't actually dip as much as Bitcoin, because obviously, stocks are not just a commodity. There's a lot of other facets that you have to consider, such as what the company's fundamentally doing, their offerings, their balance sheet, their positions, social climate, economics. There's so many factors you can think about. You could see that it was reminiscent of the Bitcoin run up initially, and then obviously when Bitcoin went parabolic, obviously in the later section, if we look at the 3-month chart here, so it's obviously shot up. So it's actually shot up a lot here in the late, in early 2021, and MicroStrategy's done the same here. So it's led me to think of what other stocks could we sort of think about that are using Bitcoin as on their balance sheets, or are directly involved in Bitcoin related activities that could sort of provide value to us as stock investors, right? So there are a couple of ticker symbols that I've looked at, and probably some of the most popular ones are Mara and RIOT, right? So these are essentially Bitcoin mining companies. So their assets are Bitcoin, they're held as Bitcoin, and their daily operations are to mine Bitcoin and even just the holdings obviously appreciating in value as Bitcoin itself appreciates in value. So this is obviously a very volatile company. As you can see, and it's directly correlated to Bitcoin. There's a lot of ads popping up here. So you can see here, obviously, again, very similar to the Bitcoin chart. It's gone parabolic as of sort of the latter part of, or the early part of 2021 here, and obviously the run up here. So, if you're an enthusiast of Bitcoin and Bitcoin related technologies, this is a ticker symbol that's worth considering. And we could dig into the fundamentals to see how many Bitcoins they own and talk about their mining setup. How many Bitcoins are they expected to generate, every day and every week, etc., and see how that value will look in the long term. And we look at the fundamentals. But I think for a stock like this, it's more narrative driven, right? And I would say 2021 has been kind of the year of the narrative. Fundamentals haven't mattered almost in the slightest in a lot of cases. And it's actually just the narrative. Obviously, we can talk about things like Wall Street bets. Obviously, there's the whole nother thing with GameStop and AMC and BlackBerry and all those kinds of tickers. And they weren't really driven by fundamental reasons, right? It's not like AMC weren't finding themselves digging themselves out of a terrible situation financially, obviously with the pandemic, forcing them to close down all the cinemas, across the US, for example, and there was no reason for it to run up. But the narrative was that people were perceiving there was a short bet. A lot of retail investors were piling in, pushing the prices higher and higher. So with a company like RIOT, also obviously the narrative is the Bitcoin narrative, right? As long as Bitcoin, there's a lot of news articles about even institutional investors now getting involved, as we discussed, Tesla and MicroStrategies and such. People are validating that Bitcoin is actually here to stay and a viable facsimile to gold or just holding cash on the balance sheet. So RIOT obviously has benefited greatly from that narrative. And the other ticker symbol that I was talking about was Marathon here, or Mara ticker symbol. Again, the same similar chart here. Obviously the run up, we get 6 month chart. So the initial run up, and then the little bit of a dip, and then obviously it's gone parabolic again towards the end here. So really, if you're looking for a direct Bitcoin investment in the stock market, these are probably two of the more well-known ones. But there are actually a couple others that are out there. And actually, Jan, who was in the chat recently, he brought this company to my attention, which is so I don't know too much about this company, admittedly, right? And I haven't looked into their story, but so XNet is it's a Chinese company who also do a lot of Bitcoin related Bitcoin related things. They're doing blockchain related activities, right? So from just the brief information or summary that I've learned about XNet, is that they were doing was it BitTorrent related things where they do a lot of cloud computing, but based in the blockchain technologies. So again, that narrative of Bitcoin technologies and Bitcoin itself obviously going up has correlated to XNet also following the similar pattern that we've now seen across 3 or 4 different charts here. So and basically we want to think about any of these companies that are based, their core value is based or tied to blockchain or Bitcoin. So XNet is a potential idea, and it's still relatively cheap. It's $7. So this could be a good speculative play if you obviously getting into MicroStrategy, which is over $1,000 or about $1,000. Even Mara and RIOT are within I think the $50-$60 range. So this is a bit of a cheaper play, and it's a close facsimile to those other companies. So another one that I was brought attention was also it's an actually ADR. So another Chinese company called SOS Limited, and from what I understand is that they do health and communications based in blockchain. So again, this is kind of another leverage play on the blockchain and the Bitcoin technology. And I think as long as Bitcoin has the attention of the sort of the general public, and it remains in the public eye, and there's no reason why that narrative will fade anytime soon that I could think of. We're probably going to see these companies continue to do very well, but obviously, as soon as Bitcoin dips, which is nothing can go off forever. So at some point, it's going to correct itself downwards, right? And even if the long-term trend is increasingly higher up, increasing as we go over time, there are obviously periods where it's going to dip, and when we see Bitcoin itself dip, in no doubt that these companies will be exposed on the down as well. So just something to be keep in mind, and also for options trading. So I've got a couple of friends who are really into options trading. So personally, I've always been more of a sort of a value investor, more of a looking at the fundamentals and trying to look at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, over longer time periods, and try to figure out what the best use of capital is over that time. Because timing the market is really hard, and unless you're a day trader, technical trader, and obviously even they don't get everything right 100%. They have stop loss, and they'll just cut off a position if it's not going the right way. But the hope is that you have more positions where you're up, to cover the losses. But to say that timing is difficult is an understatement. So, but options plays, obviously, it's the value of an option is tied not into the strike price. So as you guess, or you consider a certain entry point or a strike price, and then you hope that the chart moves towards that price over a certain period of time, and that's where you derive your values, right? So it's really difficult to predict what Bitcoin's going to be doing over the next week, let alone a month or 2 months. It could shoot 200 grand from here. It could drop back down to 30 grand. Like, no one really knows. But there's companies like this is definitely something to consider. So as Jan's pointing out, here's time in the market or time in the market. So I've always obviously been in the latter, as in time in the market. So if I think that a company, okay, let's just say that I believe in blockchain and Bitcoin, which I do to a certain extent, maybe not as much as a lot of enthusiasts out there. But let's just say that, I think Bitcoin, let's say over the next decade, I think could be a reasonable facsimile for gold, if not already. And so companies like SOS who are investing in the blockchain and are trying to build a product or products based on this technology, if Bitcoin is going to be in the spotlight and have this narrative and hold this kind of value, then in the long term, if it doesn't matter if you get in an SOS at $7, if you got in at $4 down here. In the long run, if this company, let's say, succeeds, let's say Bitcoin doubles or triples from this point, and this company gets to $30, $40, it doesn't really matter about the price difference here. So in this point in time, this price difference does look kind of ginormous, right? It's kind of a 100% increase or 200% increase. It depends how you look at it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's actually a very small jump if the price actually reaches goes on to very high levels. So this was just one thought that I've been thinking about for the last couple of months, is just these Bitcoin related plays. And there's quite a few of them out there, and I obviously haven't mentioned all of them, just a couple that I've sort of been tracking. But another interesting sector that I think could gain a lot of traction over the next, I don't know, let's say the next 2 years or 3 years, is the rise of the space sector, right? So space tourism, space travel, satellites, GPS, anything to do with that kind of, in that realm, right? And so the most high profile company probably that's kickstarted all of this hype was SpaceX. So Elon Musk's basically second company after Tesla. And he's got a bunch. He's got, Boring Company, and he's got Starlink, and he's got Neuralink, and I don't know, he's probably got a whole bunch of other ones as well. But so it really sort of shifted attention for the general public, and they started looking at this sector as more than a pipe dream, that it's actually something that can deliver real value, right? So obviously with SpaceX, for example, they're delivering astronauts, obviously flying NASA trained astronauts to the International Space Station, to piggyback on SpaceX. But obviously SpaceX is a private company. I mean, you can get some exposure to it through things like Google, who I think own like a 7% stake, or maybe that's increased over time, 7% stake in SpaceX. So that's kind of an indirect way to play that game. But you have a lot of other symbols. So probably the most high profile that's currently tradable is one that I've become quite interested in, which is Virgin Galactic, right? So if you go back to this company, I think so obviously this is back to sort of 2019, even before. So this was obviously brought to market by Chamath, former Facebook exec, right? Who's obviously now, I think CNBC refers to him as SPAC Jesus, because he's got so many of these now coming out. But so Virgin Galactic started off as a SPAC, basic $10 play, looking for a reverse merger for any sort of companies they find interesting. And at the time they announced, so you can see where their first announcement, which is probably around February-ish of 2020, where they announced that they would be merging with Virgin Galactic, which is Richard Branson's company, right? And then obviously the initial pop, and then it's kind of traded sideways with some news, whenever they've had some kind of test flight, or they've announced something or other with the Unity rockets or anything like that. It's kind of, you can see the little dips and the little peaks that it's formed along the way here. But generally, you can see obviously it's been in an uptrend because of this whole narrative with the space thing, right? So, and I didn't even talk about there's so many other ones out there. So there's Helicity SPAC, which I think is merging with Astra, which is a rocket company. You've got other companies that are interesting. I think I'm trying to think of other ones. There's what's the other one? SRAC. We can just quickly have a look at these ones. So Stable Road. So this is another SPAC, and I think they're merging with Momentous. And then there's so many. Obviously, you can look at other things like Raytheon and some of the defense related symbols. You can play this sort of angle of the space race, right? As people, more investors flock to this sector, hoping for future growth. And probably the biggest catalyst to all this, or could be one of the biggest catalysts as people draw their attentions towards this area, is the announcement that ARK Invest, so one of the most popular fund managers, certainly of the last probably 3 to 4 years, and I think last year Kathy Wood, who runs ARK Invest, so announced a profit of 100%, I believe it was, which I think was market leading in terms of all the active fund managers out there, from Bill Ackman and all the likes of all those guys. So they're opening a which I've got actually open here. So they filed with the SEC their intent for a new ETF. So if we just quickly look at here, there's a lot of text here, but I'll make this a little bit bigger. So they filed for ARKX, right? So this is going to be joining their ARK-K funds, the ARK-W funds, the ARK-G funds, which obviously look at the different disruptive sectors that they're known for. ARK-G, I think, is genomics. ARK-K is just Tesla and other disruptive companies like 3D printing and things like that. And ARK-W is kind of more internet-related disruptions. And ARK-X is going to be space disruption, right? So looking at companies like the aforementioned Virgin Galactic. And so the question is, when is this going to be actually on the market, right? So I don't know if an exact date has been announced, but just if you look at this SEC filing here, so it is proposed that the filing will become effective 75 days after filing pursuant to paragraph A2, right? So 75 days, and I think this was filed, so 13th of January. So if we're looking at 75 days out from that, it's probably looking like late March or potentially early April, where ARKX comes to market. And obviously even then, that's not an official timeline because that's just the minimum time that they have to wait, or they will be waiting to get this fund onto the market, right? But whenever ARK make, so whenever people review so if we go to the ARK, actually we go to the ARK Invest website, you'll see that they break out their funds. And the funny thing about ARK is that Cathie Wood has so much sway over the market. So whenever she publicly states something, and this is the same with Elon Musk as well, they can literally move an entire sector and definitely a particular ticker symbol whenever they just talk about this or mention a certain company, right? So what a lot of, and if you go on YouTube, you can see like dozens of channels to do this, is basically they just follow ARK Invest and they see what moves they make, what funds are they buying, what funds are they selling. If they're buying or adding a new position, that's kind of like a signal that this stock has the attention of, should have your attention, and it's you should be bullish on this particular symbol, right? So so if we look at all the various, let's just look at ARK-K for example here. So what a lot of people do is, if you look at ARK-K, so we can explore the ETF here. Okay. So I think if we look at the holdings, so we look at the fund holdings, so you can track this, I mean, not in real time, but I think they update this every day or maybe every week. And you can see their position in certain companies, right, in the ticker symbol here. So obviously ARK came to the forefront of the public's attention when they were basically the biggest bulls of Tesla on Wall Street. I think back in the day, Cathie had a price target of was it 2,500 in the regular scenario and 4,000 in the very bullish scenario. And this was back when I think Tesla was trading around the $300 mark pre-split. So she's always been the biggest Tesla bull, and this is probably how the company sort of shot to fame, almost, if you like. And so what people like to do is they like to probably look at this PDF on a daily or weekly basis, like I said, and figure out what are the positional increases or decreases or new positions that open up on the back of these, and like I said, take this as as evidence to invest or to sell a certain position, right? So what we're looking for is when eventually they invest in, so when they start this ARKX fund and they start buying up holdings to constitute the fund, and obviously, and then people will invest indirectly in those funds through their ETF, right? It'd be interesting to see what ticker symbols will be included, and probably, a Virgin Galactic has a high probability of being invested in by ArcX, I would say. Then you would probably likely see a big rush of retail investors, but maybe even other hedge funds or fund managers who, listen to Cathie Wood, and her word obviously carries weight, and also sort of ride on the on her tailcoats and invest in these funds with her, hoping to catch on the way up as well. So I think Virgin Galactic has a very interesting case. I mean, it's shot up quite a lot. So if you look at from late 2020 to early this period, like to this year, basically it's doubled in value from the $30-$20 mark all the way up to the mid 50s here. And even then, actually, there was a bit of a dip because Virgin Galactic announced that there was a delay in their latest attempt to launch. I think they wanted to go over some technical checks, and they weren't comfortable with actually shooting the rocket up into space yet. But so there was a bit of a trace back on that news. But you can imagine if this stock, let's say that the test flight is rescheduled for, I don't know, later this month or potentially early next month, and it's successful, and then it paves the way for Richard Branson going up into space with the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Justin Bieber, and despite the fact that there's no revenue behind Virgin Galactic, because they're essentially still in R&D, and there's nothing physical. There's no physical revenues behind any of this yet. It's just like a pipe dream where in the future, sort of wealthy individuals will be paying, anywhere from, I think, like $250,000 to $1 million for spacewalks and all that kind of stuff. So investors perceive this narrative as having long-term value, right? And then if there's a pop on that, you can imagine that if ArcX picks up some of these shares, and then retail investors follow Cathie and ARC into this investment, that there could be another pop here. So, so full disclosure, I do have a position in Virgin Galactic here, in anticipation, as Jan says, this time in market, because I have no idea if or when any of this will happen. It's still speculative at this point. So this stock could easily retrace back to if a technical trader, probably support levels at, you draw a line here at about the mid 30s, and then you could draw another support line probably in the mid 20s, and all the way down to say about $15 here. So it could easily fill any of these gaps and drop back down on any sort of negative news where, I don't know, let's say the rocket explodes, or anything sort of negative happens out of that, or they just, I don't know, something capitulates with the company entirely. You can see that happening, but there is a chance for this to go parabolic even more so if we can catch some good news here. So again, this is not timing the market, because I have no idea when or if this is going to take off. But if you're in now, even at these relatively high prices, and if you're bullish about these narrative factors, even at this price point, it could be a good time to get in, depending on your point of view here, right? So I'm just reading the chat here. So Jan says there are even software offerings for tracking ARC funds. Yeah, so yeah, no doubts people have created software to track all these movements. That's check this out, Lucid tracking. Yeah, so we haven't even talked about, that's another SPAC play. So SPAC plays are interesting, and 2020 was the year of the SPAC, right? We had so many SPACs coming out to market. I mean, there's so many to go out, and that trend is still continuing here in 2021. And I think the Lucid Motors one. So if you haven't heard of this company, so it's run by this guy. I think his name is Peter Rawlinson. So he was formerly a Tesla, I think Elon's head or chief engineer for the Model S, right? So this was way back, probably going back, I don't even know, 5+ years easily, right? And then he sort of spun off, went on and to do his own thing after the launch of the Tesla Model S. And there's a company that he started, which is called Lucid Motors, right? Actually, we can even bring up so we can visualize the products that they're trying to bring to market here. So if you can see, I think this is the Lucid Air here. So you can see, so they're targeting sort of the upper end of the electric vehicle market here. You can see it's quite a beautiful car, actually. Very streamlined, very sleek, very futuristic looking, right? You see it's sort of a mock-up of the interior. So it's obviously this is not going to be a cheap car, and I don't recall the price range of this, but I think it was like 70,000 plus US dollars. You can see another mock-up here with the dashboard and futuristic and the minimalistic sort of interior design here. So this company, there were rumors that they were merging with Churchill Capital Corp IV, which is a SPAC which we've just sort of looking at here, and so people were speculating even early on. So you can see, actually, let's go back to the 6-month chart here. So obviously there was an initial pop here early this year, and it's kind of slowly gone up. It actually, there's a couple of stages here where I think there was initial sort of rumors sort of here in late January, and then I think more recently people have sort of been I don't know, retail investors, I guess, are kind of impatient, and they wanted to believe that this is the case. And there was a bunch of things where Peter Rawlinson was on CNBC where he gave an interview, and he neither confirmed or denied that CCIV were in fact merging with Lucid Motors. And that kind of fueled more speculation that they were indeed in talks, because you would probably outright deny it if that was untrue, right? So he kind of left it open-ended, and retail investors interpreted that as, hey, that's a potential signal that this is actually being negotiated in the background. And then I think even more recently, so this last pop here was there was a leaked screenshot from a Bloomberg terminal where it stated, I don't remember the name of the investor, but we can quickly look it up there. So Bloomberg Lucid Motors leak. So you can see probably images. Maybe we can bring up something here. Yeah, so we can look up this picture here. This is on someone's Twitter. Okay, let's close this. Yeah, so Churchill Capital Corp IV proposed to acquire Lucid Motors. The transaction was proposed, 14th of January. Was there more details to this? I believe I remember reading that there was a large investor, and it was one of the first investors in Lucid had sold or were negotiating to transfer their stake over to CCIV in preparation for this, I guess. And so this was one of the pieces of evidence that leaked, like I said, that led to this rampant speculation. But actually, that's not the one that I was talking about. Maybe there's another screenshot here. Let's see if we can find it. No, it's going to be, it's finding a needle in a haystack. But yeah, there was definitely rumors where the owners of, or part owners of Lucid Motors were negotiating a separate deal with CCIV for them to acquire their stake in separately to the SPAC merger. So that's what led to this last pop here. So again, none of this has been confirmed by the CEO or anyone sort of related to the company, but this is just all rampant speculation at this point. And it's not going to be one of these companies like Nikola, who sort of I think they were destroyed by a short seller report, allegations of fraudulent behavior and whatnot. Let me close my Steam here. So this company, obviously, because Rawlinson, he's actually got credibility as a chief engineer for the Tesla Model S. So the technology potentially is as legit as it gets, right? And I believe he still has a good relationship with Elon Musk. So there's going to be a bit of that sort of, that link is never going to die. So as long as Rawlinson is involved with Lucid Motors, there's going to be some inherent value with him working closely with Elon, in whatever capacity that is, even in an advisory role, or even just, having chats as a friend or whatever. So this is another highly speculative one. So it is definitely an innovative investment idea, but there's nothing fundamental at this point, because Lucid Motors obviously is still an R&D shop. They haven't sold a single car yet. They're still designing the car. They're still trying to bring it to market. But we've seen how Tesla has gone parabolic over the last couple of years probably. That if Lucid Motors comes to market, it could potentially be something that we could see it happen again, play out again, right? So this is another ticker symbol to be interested in, so as Jan points out here. But just going back to the space sector, so there is actually this company here. So we'll bring it up here. It's a GSAT. So I don't know how many people know about this company, and it's a relatively small market cap company, listed here at $2.48, and I think the market cap actually doesn't show you here, but the market cap, if we look at, so we can see the market cap here listed in Google is just over 4 billion. So it's still a relatively small company. But again, it's playing the same angle as Virgin Galactic, and it's that space narrative, right? So, and there are actually fundamental drivers behind this company and why it's sort of gone parabolic of late. And we can actually look at some of those, because this is a company that I'm really interested in, and I think that it might seem expensive now, as we talked about. Time in the market versus time in the market, because if you buy in at $2 or you buy in at $1, ultimately it doesn't matter if this company is very successful in the long term, right? But so if we look at let's start here. So a lot of friends and family do ask me how I sort of begin my due diligence process on any particular stock, right? So let's walk through that, right? So there's a ticker symbol, like it's a GSAT that I'm interested in, right? Okay, so the first thing you could do obviously is type that ticker symbol into Google, and you can see the historical chart for GSAT, and you can see obviously this company going way back to 2006, and obviously there was a precipitous drop early on, not much happening. It went all the way down to 15 cents, I think we saw there. Basically consolidated for a long period of time, little sort of peaks and troughs as we went along the way, and then more recently it's been picked up again, obviously because it's following that narrative, right? So I don't know much about what happened during the period that's predated 2021 essentially, but in a lot of cases it's irrelevant because of just the climate that we find ourselves in socioeconomically. With the pandemic, changed up everything, changed up the whole game. The Fed obviously is responsible for pushing a lot of the money towards the market again, giving retail investors stimulus checks, just lowering interest rates. So there's a lot of those kind of socioeconomic factors that have contributed to stocks going on this massive run, probably starting from March, April of 2020 all the way to this point. So it's almost irrelevant as to what happened before this. And we see this with other companies, like vaccine companies. So one I can think of is Novavax, where they had a huge price run up in the past, up to $300+ and then just before the pandemic, it was trading up probably around, I think it was $5 or maybe even less than that. No, it probably less than $1 if I recall. And now here today, Novavax is up at 300 the last time I looked. So it's almost irrelevant, really, the stocks that happened before 2020. But so how do we start the due diligence if we start looking at this company? So there are many approaches, right? So you can look at, so the first link here is actually Yahoo Finance, and this is when you can start looking at the balance sheet. So I think skip all this part. Okay. So Yahoo Finance is a pretty decent resource, I guess, to start looking at the financials of a company. So I think we click on the financials tab, if it actually not letting me click on it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so you can actually see the balance sheets, the income statements, and that kind of thing. And so we just have a quick look at GSAT here. So their revenue has not grown significantly at all from 2017, 2018, 2019, and even the trailing 12 months here. I mean, there was essentially zero growth here, and there was only a little bit of a minute growth there. So there's nothing interesting, again, looking at this, at the balance sheet here in terms of revenue growth. So if you're targeting high growth revenue companies, this is probably not the one. But I mean, this is just one aspect, right? And so we can also discuss the narrative again of why it's popped. And we also look at things like earnings per share. We can look at things like earnings before interest and tax, depreciation as well, appreciation. So this company actually, if I can look at trailing 12 months, it's actually positive. So negative if you don't include the appreciation, depreciation, but positive from an accounting perspective. So actually, if you even look at 2018, the company was profitable pre-accounting practice. It's a GAAP related EBITDA, as it's referred to. So this company, but it's not that fascinating from a balance sheet perspective, right? If we're looking at this company, just purely from the financials. So that's just one aspect, and you can do a whole deep dive in this. You could look at price to sales ratio. You can look at things on their balance sheet. For example, click on balance sheet. You can look at things like the amount of assets they own, their liabilities, how much cash they have on hand. All kinds of things you can look at. I mean, there are so many different facets you can look at. Why is this shifting around? There are so many factors you can do a complete deep dive on all of this, right? But again, as I've said, in the year 2021, the fundamentals haven't mattered as much, and it's really about the narrative. So what is a narrative behind GSAT that makes it compelling as an investment opportunity or even consideration, right? So the other step that I usually do is just click on this news tab here, and Google does a really good job of aggregating relevant news. There's obviously a bit of a bias towards certain places like Motley Fool and Investor Place tend to pop up a lot, but these articles obviously generally they're colored by a bit of bias, but they're pretty informative overall, I would say. So take this with a grain of salt, but still very handy, right? So if you look at, so this is from 5 days ago. So if we look at the chart, so 5 days ago, so what's the date today? Is it the 17th, the 15th? So 10th here. So basically what this article is describing is this initial pop from about $1.28 all the way up to about $2.60, right? So why did it go parabolic? Basically double in value from this one day. And hopefully this article would give us a little bit of insight. And I've read this, so I do know what it's going to be discussing. And essentially why it popped was that there was news coming out that Qualcomm, which is one of the biggest semiconductors in, it's one of the biggest players in the semiconductor sector, had actually formed a partnership with Global Stars. So we can look at this a little bit. So one of the Global Star solutions is the band N53. This is a mid-band spectrum that the company says is good for customers who would not otherwise have access to a licensed spectrum. Okay, so we don't need to know all the specific technical details about everything, but essentially one big company announced that it really liked this solution. In fact, Qualcomm shared that it was including the band N53 in its latest chip. So if you have the biggest, I think Qualcomm is actually the biggest semiconductor chip maker for mobile phones, if I'm not mistaken. I think up there with, TSM, so it's a Taiwan semiconductor. But TSM do a wide variety of different chips as well for desktop graphics cards, all kinds of things, right? But Qualcomm is more focused on the mobile space. So this is obviously a name that you hear brought up a lot in the for opportunities related to 5G or the growth of or the proliferation of mobile devices. So obviously this is kind of big news because you got a massive company with such global outreach as Qualcomm, who are now bullish on GSAT and their chips, and including it. And obviously, they're going to be paying a royalty to GSAT if they're going to be using some of the technology in the chips that they release, right? So this is obviously the market obviously popped on this news as we saw the 50% increase, and it's retraced a little bit since then, and it's kind of gone a bit of a run here. But so you can think about this in a couple of angles, because so obviously, yeah, so we're talking about 5G so this is a different thesis. So we talked about space sector as being one particular sector that could be investors that could be bullish on. We talked about Bitcoin as another sector where investors could sort of project upwards. And then we're looking at this third sector, which is 5G, right? So right now, the global standard is 4G. And people have always been discussing 5G for a couple of years now, and what is the next leap. And I think if 5G ends up becoming a huge thing, which most likely it will, because even players like Apple are releasing 5G phones, then I think this could be relatively big news, and it could, I'm quite bullish on this. I don't have any position in GSAT as yet, but it's definitely a company that I'm looking at as a longer term investment and where it could go. And besides this, there's actually another piece of news, which I don't know if this is going to be mentioned, but they actually entered a partnership with Nokia at some point too. Okay, so close this. So one of this is, okay, so this article does not reach it too, but if we look at, so I mean, Google is basically the best resource for any kind of research you want to do, right? So if we look at, yeah, I think this article, so 4 weeks ago. So I think actually this is responsible for this initial pop from early January to sort of mid-January. So this initial pop upwards, and then after it consolidated, this piece of news was to do with Qualcomm, right? But what was responsible for this piece of news? So if you go back to what we just saw here, okay, it's not letting me read that particular article. Let me see. So obviously this is the correction afterwards, but what I'm trying to garner is that, so global GSAT stock price soared in recent weeks following deals with Nokia and BattleBox. So BattleBox I'm not too familiar with, but Nokia obviously everyone knows was one of the biggest telecommunications and phone producers, back in probably the mid 90s, early 90s. And then obviously they faded with the invention of, first it was the BlackBerry, and then obviously now smartphones. But they've moved on to other things such as, 5G and 4G infrastructure and telecommunications infrastructure, all that kind of things, right? So there's still a huge company in that realm, I think up there with the likes of Ericsson, for example, and Huawei, the Chinese equivalent of all these companies. So Nokia is obviously a very reputable and legacy company that's been around for quite some time now. So Nokia is working with Tideworks Technology to deploy G-Star's Band 53, which I think is the same chip. So if we go back to, I don't know if I left it open actually, but it was the N53 Band N53 Spectrum. So it was basically talking about the same technology here. So two companies, and now we're talking Nokia and we're talking Qualcomm, two companies that now have formed partnerships with GSAT. So there is a lot of narrative here. So whether or not this actually ends up being something that fades over time, it could very well happen, as we saw the chart for GSAT over the years. So I've obviously looked in all these dips and peaks because I haven't followed the company throughout all these years, and there could have been certain narratives that were driving these kinds of things. But if we're just looking in the last 3 months, 6 months, like I said, there is a lot of reason for this bullish play, to be bullish on GSAT rather, and it's definitely a company that I'm considering, opening a position in, seeing where it goes and riding that sort of wave the next year, 2 years, maybe even longer, depending on how the position plays out, right? Again, it's a bit speculative, but the narrative seems to suggest that a lot of companies are are appreciating the technology that GSAT is putting out there in the market, and incorporating it into their own sort of infrastructure and deployments, right? So so this is another idea, potentially worth considering. If you're looking for, I don't know, some kind of speculative play, or you're just interested in what I'm thinking about it. So we've looked at Bitcoin, looked at the space sector. So another interesting one is, so this one is on the back of Clubhouse, which is becoming this huge social media. It's gaining a lot of buzz lately, right? And I missed this one on the initial rally too. So when it IPO'd, back in late or August 2020, it traded sideways for a hell of a long time. All the way until basically, let's say, middle of January, trading somewhere between the 30, 40, it did get up to the mid 50s, but it retraced all the way back to the 30, 40 range. So it's essentially trading sideways for a hell of a long time. And again, this is going back to the point where timing the market is impossible. So there's no way to know when it would have popped, right? Because the Clubhouse app, which is using the technology that API is building, and I'll explain a little bit about the app, so in case you're not familiar with it either. But essentially, time in market. So if you didn't bought at any of these points, like I said, it would have seemed expensive between 56 after it popped in 36, and you would have thought, I missed the boat. I didn't get in at a good price. And then maybe when you did get in at 56, then it started fading, and you would have sort of, if you had sort of paper hands or weak hands, as they say in Wall Street bets, paper hands, you probably would have sold potentially, and you would have lost out and missed on this huge pickup here, where it's essentially doubled, if not tripled in value, depending on your entry point. And so this was based on, again, so we're going back to this Cathie Wood and Elon Musk, where they move the market so immensely from just tweets that they send out there into the universe, or even just random things that they say on an interview. Where I believe around about this time, so late January, so this is actually coinciding with, of all things, the GameStop frenzy that happened. I don't know if we need to discuss all the details about the GameStop, but obviously a lot of retail investors on Wall Street bets started piling in to GameStop on the hopes to short squeeze these hedge funds like Melvin Capital and Citadel, for example. And by pushing up the price, they would squeeze all the short selling to cover their positions, and then obviously they'd have to buy in the stock at these phenomenal prices, these really astronomical prices, and push it up even higher. And throughout all of that, obviously there was this controversy with Vlad Tenev, who was the CEO of Robinhood. So I think, if not the most popular brokerage in the US, it's certainly one of the most popular. And they had to limit trading on some of these ticker symbols like GameStop and AMC, because there were so many retailers piling in. And at the time, there was huge uproar, and I was one of them, where I thought that they were kind of puppets for Citadel, because Citadel actually, so the reason why Robinhood offers free commission, I don't know if a lot of people know this, unless you're sort of really into the weeds of all this stuff, but essentially why Robinhood offers free commission is that they sell all these market orders from the retail investors, so people using the app, to Citadel, and it's called payment for order flow. So what Citadel does is they're a market maker. So when they get all these huge, and obviously they have very sophisticated algorithms working all these numbers, so it's not like someone there taking orders manually or anything like that. So this happens within microseconds or milliseconds. So all the order flow comes from Robinhood, and Citadel have agreements with a variety of brokers, I'm sure. So they have this huge algorithm that churns all this data, and then they figure out if they have sellers and buyers from different sides meeting in the middle to basically resolve the trade, and then they take off, I think it's like a small spread in between the ask and the bid, right? So they basically skim a little bit off the top. So Robinhood gets paid by Citadel for sending them order flow, because Citadel can then execute them on behalf of either institutional investors or the retail investors coming from Robinhood, and then they can just take off a little bit at the top. So it's very beneficial for Citadel to be receiving all these order flows from the randos on Robinhood, and so people thought that because Citadel was paying Robinhood for these order flows, that because Citadel was also on the receiving end of this GameStop squeeze, that there was something sort of more nefarious going on, where Citadel had there was even posts on Reddit and things on Twitter where, and I don't know if any of this is has been proven, and probably not, but basically Vlad had received a call from Ken Griffin, I think it was, or higher ups at Citadel, and said that, okay, you need to shut this down because obviously it's hurting our business. So then Robinhood put a stop on it, and it limited retail investors from actually purchasing these ticker symbols, which I think is unsubstantiated, because Vlad later came out and said that it was actually to do with clearinghouse regulations, where when this gets into this whole complicated thing again, but when you buy stocks, it's actually on a T+2 basis, which means that you don't actually own a stock for 2 days, while in the background money is exchanging hands between these brokerages, and then the possession of the stock is then physically transferred from one brokerage house to the other. So it takes two days, and in the meanwhile, Robinhood or whichever brokerage is involved has to post the capital, the collateral to these clearinghouses to make sure that you don't just ask another brokerage to send you stock without the actual money being traded, right, like beforehand. So you have to provide the clearinghouse collateral so that if that does fall through, that the clearinghouse actually can still pay the brokerage who's selling the stock, even if the deal falls through, right? So there's all this liquidity, complicated law. So that's what came out. And anyways, long story short, all of that was discussed on Clubhouse. And actually, I have a little bit of here, so we can actually just listen to 15, 20 seconds of it. Where so if you're not familiar with Clubhouse, so we can talk about. So going back to API stock in a second, but Clubhouse is basically one of the use cases of the technology that API is building, right? So we just listen to a very short segment of this. So this is Clubhouse here. So it's on someone's iPhone. Someone's uploaded this, and you see it's kind of like to best summarize Clubhouse, it's kind of like a real-time podcast. So it's audio only. There's no visual element really. Apart from you see the little avatars, but people can drop in and out of these different chat rooms and sort of just be a fly on the wall. Whether it's Elon Musk talking in this case with Vlad Tenev, the CEO of Robinhood, or I don't know. There's athletes on here. Sometimes you can see. I think there was one where I saw an article with MC Hammer was discussing something or other, and people were listening in on those discussions. So we just listened to 5 to 10 seconds or whatever, just to see what it's about. So hopefully, yeah. Okay, well, we'll stop it there. But so Vlad was in a discussion here with Elon Musk. So this app has basically exploded in popularity of late, and I think for it to be fair, for the longest time, go back to the API chart. It was actually in beta mode, and I don't know if it's actually. I think it still is in beta mode. So it hasn't been officially released, so you have to get invites and to actually join, to open an account with Clubhouse. But I missed the initial action on this, where obviously if you'd got in at any point before the 19th of January, you would have enjoyed this huge sort of upshoot, where it's double tripled. But I guess the question is it too late? And there are several ways to look at this, right? So if we look at API stock here. So API stock currently has a market cap of 10, and it's obviously a very young company, having, like I said, IPO'd in middle of last year, 2020. So still very early days for this company, right? And so the question is Clubhouse a real thing? Will it be a thing? Will it enjoy huge user growth? Will it be taken up by the masses? Will it become sort of the next hot thing, where, people are still using Twitter, Instagram, obviously YouTube is still a huge thing, right? So there's a lot of these social networks, but so at $10 billion, so even at this huge run up here, if you're investing for the very long term, so again, the short term, I don't know if this is going to correct. Nobody knows. It's really hard to predict. If you're buying, short dated options, it's really hard to know if this is going to continue on for a little while, or it's going to retrace and then sort of head back up. But for the very long term, we look at 10 billion market cap here. So what are some other platforms or social media networks that we could use as a comparison, right? So other ones we could think about is like Pinterest, for example. So Pinterest has a market cap of 53 billion here, which is about roughly 5 times bigger currently than API. So can Clubhouse be, equatable to Pinterest in terms of overall users, overall revenue, and that kind of thing? Like, so, we think about very long term, because if you think of Pinterest, it's been around since, so it predated API an entire year, and it also traded sideways for a hell of a long time before it really took off here lately. So if you could think about, like, maybe this little offshoot from, say, middle of September here, from early March to middle of September here. So this could be similar to that first wave of API, which we just saw, that first offshoot, and it's obviously continued on to do pretty good things. So with API, if you think Clubhouse, and I actually myself haven't used the app, but just, like, again, Elon Musk being on it is a big deal, and they can attract celebrities, and they can make it very popular amongst the millennials. This could definitely be a stock that's worth investing in for the long term as well. So other companies like Snapchat, I don't know, another stock here. It's at 100 billion. Again, very similar looking chart. Initial pop, consolidates for a long while, and then it sort of goes parabolic towards the end here, right? So I think API is a very interesting investment at this point in time. I could see it joining the likes of Snapchat and Pinterest, picking up steam. I don't know, Twitter, I think, has actually had a bit of much more spotty history. It's gone parabolic recently, but it's kind of had a lot of ups and downs over the years, right? But so that, like, again, from the 2020, ever since the pandemic dip, the Fed stimulus, everything we talked about, just the overheated. A lot of people have argued that it's a bubble, even of the valuations we're seeing these days. It's just gone absolutely bonkers, right? So I think if you're an investor in this scene, in this sector of the social networking companies, API is certainly one that you should be considering. I don't know if, like I said, if you're a short-term investor, $100 could seem kind of pricey. I would probably tend to wait personally for it to decline a little bit before jumping in. But it's certainly a company that I'm interested in looking at for a long-term investment here. I think it has a potential to at least 2x or 3x from this point. Obviously, depending on your time frames here. But I'm talking about over the next year or 2 years, and it could happen even faster than that. It could accelerate, depending on the narrative and the retail investor and even mutual funds getting involved, right? There's a lot of things. So Jan here, I'm just reading the chat here. So I think you should compare it to Fastly or Twilio. Okay, that's interesting. So obviously Fastly is a content distribution network, and actually I think from a technological perspective, I think this is certainly probably more accurate than a social network. I think Jan is correct. So So API is more of the technology behind it. The guts of it, I guess, is a platform that allows it or facilitates these kinds of interactions that social platforms can be built upon, right? So this is what, I guess, API, that's their core technology. So yeah, in a sense, it is a content distribution network. So I think that's an apt comparison. And I think Fastly was a stock that I was very bullish on throughout the 2020 or throughout last year. It's kind of leveled off of late. But again, it went parabolic at certain points. It's sort of mid since the pandemic. I mean, a lot of these technology growth stocks were just sort of crushing it during this period, and then it's kind of gone up and down. It's kind of traded sideways almost throughout this period, right? But yeah, very interesting company for the long term also. I don't know if we'll spend too much time talking about this one, but certainly one of the biggest players in that sort of CDN in infrastructure. And Twilio, which Jan mentions, so this is actually one of the most solid investments actually in the long term, because if you look at the chart, there's a similar theme here where a lot of these companies have just traded sideways, and then in the last couple of years where it's just really sort of gone all the way to space essentially. So yeah, if you invested any time before 2018, you would have made a killing on Twilio. Even any time between 2018 and 2020, you probably would have made a killing. And we might even be saying the same, from 2021 onwards, where it could sort of do another shoot and grow to infinity, essentially. But yeah, I think API is certainly now sort of predating all these sort of proxies, I guess, if you will, these stocks that trade sideways for a while, go up, and then consolidate, and then end up going up, further down the line. So I think API, obviously, it's a very young company. There's a lot of potential in the long term. So definitely one to look at and consider. So Jan also says API has most potential in terms of live video shopping. Okay, so that aspect I'm not too familiar about. I haven't looked too much into that. I've been more focusing on the Clubhouse aspect, right? But I mean, there are a lot of articles. So here's a random article that on Seeking Alpha, which is another one of these sort of news vendors that I think there's a sort of submitted by various parties here. Equal Ocean, I'm not sure who they are, but obviously they've written an entire article here, and you can go through and the due diligence on this is usually pretty good. They even often disclose their position, which is obviously important to know if you're looking to invest in certain companies, because obviously your views are going to be biased depending on if you're long or short a particular company, right? But overall, these due diligence pieces are quite provide a fair bit of value, just to if nothing else, just to add to your research sort of array of data sources to convince you to open a position if it's compelling enough, right? So yeah, I'm not familiar with the video shopping aspect, but obviously with the Clubhouse, and you can see here they talk about how Elon Musk's appearance on Clubhouse, and I think I saw recently there was a tweet from Elon Musk where he was sort of asking the Vladimir Putin or representatives of the Kremlin to join him on a Clubhouse chat. It'd be interesting to see if that pans out. I think I saw an article on CNBC about that. But so all of that is again adding to the narrative of API. So if you have a ticker symbol, no matter how good the technology is, if no one is interested in it, if there's no traders playing with that ticker symbol, then you don't have liquidity. If you don't have liquidity, then the price will not move. You won't get any action, right? So narrative is very important, especially in this climate. So it's just something to consider, and I think fundamentally, like myself, where I tend to focus a lot on the fundamentals and look at a stock's trajectory over a long period of time. It's kind of sad to say, but I think in a lot of cases that's kind of losing traction, and a lot of investors don't even care about the fundamentals anymore. It's really about the narrative, and that's what really is driving this whole Wall Street bets sort of tsunami right now that's sort of taken over the world, right? I think they went from like 500,000 users from about a year ago or so, and then I think last time I checked, the Wall Street Bets on Reddit, the subreddit, had over 9 million members now. And if you go on there and you know, I do check out to see what's going on in those threads from time to time, and there are a lot of new investors on there who don't know much about fundamentals of companies, right? They basically just follow the herd, right? So when people say, you know, invest in company X, Y, and Z, they tend to just throw money on there, and because it's really hard to knock that because of the success a lot of people's having, but I mean, really, it's not really they don't really understand what a balance sheet is. They don't probably. I mean, I'm generalizing way too much here, but a lot of people probably don't even think about the nuances of why a certain company or the catalysts and things like that, or the reasons to be bullish on a certain company, other than people just throwing a name around on the subreddit, right? So, but you know, having said all that, you should really invest in the manner that you feel comfortable with, and try not to get caught up on a lot of the white noise around you. And there's a lot of it. I mean, not even on YouTube. There's a lot of I mean, the financial community is kind of fragmented, if you will. There's a lot of channels, you know, popular channels on YouTube, like Dave Lee and Jeremy on financial education, and Meet Kevin, and there's a lot of these big massive channels, right? And then you have on Instagram, like I follow a bunch of them too, where they post a lot of images of different companies and of earnings reports and things like that. And then obviously on Reddit, which is a, you know, completely different medium, and there's a huge community there, like I've said, you know, 9 million people on the Wall Street Bets subreddit, and there's you know, other subreddits like the investing subreddit and stock subreddit and a whole bunch of places, right? So I mean, people find information from a range of different sources. They have different styles. Some people have high risk tolerance, some people have low risk tolerance, some people like to invest in dividends, other people like to invest in growth companies. So I mean, there's no wrong or right answers. I mean, people, you know, can get wealthy, can build a you know, huge stock portfolio basically in any kind of manner that they that suits them and works for them, right? So it's hard for me to knock anyone's style, but like I said, just from what I've seen of 2021 so far, and even, you know, it's fair to say even 2020, where fundamentals haven't meant that much. Like if you look at the PS ratio, so the price to sales ratio of Tesla, I mean, that thing's insane. I think I saw a chart where, you know, companies, more established companies like, you know, Toyota and Mercedes-Benz, all these kinds of companies, where they were, on average, I think they were making something like between 20,000 or 40,000 on a car, in terms of market cap, adding market cap to 20,000 or 40,000 market cap per car that they sold. Whereas for every car that Tesla sold, they were adding like $1 million in market cap or something really inflated, right? So I mean, not that I'm knocking Tesla or anything, because I also invest in Tesla, but the fundamentals don't mean as much, right? It's about the narrative. It's about what you perceive as the future value or the direction of a company. So anyway, I've been rambling on for a hell of a long time now. I think it's coming up over an hour now. It's about just an hour and a quarter, I think, has passed since I started this stream. You know, I mean, I hope to make more. So obviously, I started the channel during the pandemic. I think it was basically middle of May last year, 2020. Sort of analyzing these stocks from a fundamental perspective. You know, doing a deep dive, looking at social factors, looking at total addressable market, looking at the balance sheet, looking at income statement, looking at just aspects that I think could affect a company, and why I was bullish on a certain company, right? So I've made videos on Neo and Lemonade. I made a video on the Trade Desk. So all these companies which I really like. Unfortunately, with Lemonade, talking about the valuations again, it never made sense to me to open up a big position. So I only have a small position in Lemonade, unfortunately, and I've missed out a lot of the huge run up as of late. But yeah, so hopefully the channel can go back to at some point creating these kinds of videos again, and I would love to spend more time doing that. But you know, I thought today, just to get the creative juices flowing again, just to kind of get some signs of life, you know, to people who are following my channel, just to know that, you know, I'm still alive. I'm still actively investing. I'm glued to my phone 24 hours a day, reading the news. You know, I see all the semiconductor industry currently, you know, obviously having huge issues, and the Biden administration looking at ways to resolve that. You know, so angles there. So, you know, just off the top of my head, companies like, so I won't spend too much time, but so just some other companies like Corsair, which is a gaming's peripheral company. So you think of like Logitech. So they've had a phenomenal earnings report, but they've announced that they suffered shortages due to semiconductors. The semiconductor market being congested, and they're not being able to actively have access to as many units as they could to sell their peripherals, essentially, right? So if that gets resolved by the Biden administration, or they throw more resources at it, so this is a company that could really benefit. And I think I've looked at it. So again, I won't go too much into it, but Corsair had revenues of close to $2 billion, and the market cap is only $4 billion, which is, it's a phenomenal ratio of sales to market cap, right? If you look at that, and I think Logitech is an equivalent. I think is 4 times the market cap or 5 times the market cap, and only about twice the revenue, right? So this is a company could be bullish, and obviously TSM, which I mentioned way back earlier. So this is, I think, the largest semiconductor manufacturer in the world, and I mean, this is a great performing stock. So things like that. So I'm keeping abreast of that. I've been obviously been aware of what's going on Wall Street Bets with GameStop, AMC, BlackBerry, Bed Bath & Beyond, all these kinds of tickers. And obviously lately, when they've sort of ventured into the weed stocks like Tilray and Sundial Growers and this kind of thing. So certainly actively aware of all this stuff. But I haven't found the energy or the motivation to create content. But I'm still around. So if you ever want to reach out to me, send me a tweet. You can hit me up on Instagram. I check that quite often. You can even just submit a comment on one of my videos on YouTube, and I read all my comments. So if you have anything you want to ask me or anything like that, feel free to reach out. I'm around, and hopefully, like I said, I can get back to creating more videos at some point very soon. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. For those of you who've managed to sit through a lot of the stream, and yeah, best of luck investing 2021. And keep in touch, and I appreciate the support of everyone who's subscribed to my channel, who's reached out to me throughout my journey so far, and hopefully in the future we can continue all this together. So yeah, thanks again.